Mike Townsend's fingers trembled slightly as he buttoned his postal uniform. New town, new route, new life. The mirror reflected a man with more salt than pepper in his hair now, crow's feet etching deeper around eyes that had seen better days. "You've done this before," he muttered to his reflection. "Just a job. Just mail." The Vineyard, Utah post office smelled of paper dust and industrial cleaner. Smaller than his old Pittsburgh branch, but the rhythms were the same. The mechanical whir of sorting machines, the thud of rubber stamps, the shuffle of feet across linoleum. Dominic Reeves didn't offer a handshake when Mike entered his office, just a curt nod that sent his military-precise posture into momentary disarray. Something about Mike seemed to unsettle the supervisor. "Townsend, you're on Route 137. Dom's voice carried a heaviness that didn't match the mundane assignment. His eyes darted to the window, then back. Started as a Vineyard property. Now it's all development, McMansions mostly. Mike nodded. Straightforward enough. Dom's laugh lacked humor. Nothing straightforward about 137. He opened his desk drawer with a key from his personal ring, odd protocol for route assignments, and removed a weathered manila envelope, yellowed at the edges. "Special instructions?" Mike asked, reaching for it. Dom didn't release his grip immediately. The last 3 carriers quit within a month. "Economy's rough everywhere," Mike offered. The one before them disappeared. Dom's eyes locked with Mike's. No trace. A beat of silence hung between them before Mike snorted. "What is this? Some kind of hazing ritual? Scare the new guy?" Dom released the envelope without smiling. "There are 5 rules for this route. Follow them without exception." Mike took the envelope, the paper surprisingly heavy. "Mailman rules. Don't get bit by dogs. Don't lose mail. Don't..." "Read them." Dom's voice cut like a letter opener. "Memorize them." Mike pulled out a single sheet of paper, the handwriting tight and precise, almost architectural in its formation. 1. Never deliver mail to house number 1337 after sunset, even if you're running behind. 2. If you hear whistling from inside any mailbox, close it immediately and move to the next house. 3. Always place packages for the blue Victorian on the porch. Never in the mailbox, and never look through its windows. 4. If a child with a red balloon asks you for the time, say only "it's almost time," and continue walking. 5. If you find a letter addressed to the previous resident with no return address, bring it back to the post office and burn it. Mike looked up, expecting Dom to crack a smile. The supervisor's face remained grave. "You're serious about this?" Dom stood, his chair scraping against the linoleum. "Tour of the facility before you start your route." As they walked the sorting floor, Mike folded the rules and tucked them into his breast pocket. Just nonsense to mess with him. Had to be. "Break room, locker room, sorting stations." Dom pointed methodically. "That door remains locked." He gestured to a heavy metal door at the back. Mike's curiosity piqued. "What's in there?" "Archives," Dom said too quickly. "Old equipment." As they passed, Mike glimpsed through the small reinforced window. Not equipment, but walls covered in photographs. postal workers through the decades, their faces scratched out with black marker. All except one, a woman from the 1960s based on her uniform. Her face circled instead of scratched, her smile too wide for comfort. "Who's—" "You'll want to organize your bags by street," Dom interrupted, walking faster. "Subdivision has cul-de-sacs, easy to backtrack if you're not careful." Outside, the October air bit at Mike's cheeks as Dom handed him the keys to his mail truck. "Last thing," Dom said, his eyes darting around the parking lot as if looking for eavesdroppers. "This route, it picks its carriers as much as we pick them." Mike forced a laugh. "Sounds like a fortune cookie." "You've got no family here, no connections." Dom's words weren't a question. "That's good. Keep it that way." The comment stung more than it should have. 18 years of marriage dissolved into divorce papers and an empty apartment. No kids. No real friends left in Pittsburgh. Not after the depression that followed Amanda leaving. That's why Vineyard appealed. Anonymity, distance, clean slate. "Just deliver the damn mail," Mike muttered to himself as Dom walked away. The route itself seemed pleasant enough. New development with wide streets and manicured lawns. Mike moved methodically, the familiar rhythm of walking, sorting, delivering almost meditative. House by house, his anxiety receded until he reached the blue Victorian. It stood out among the modern constructions, a relic from another century with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch. Unlike the other perfectly green lawns, its yard grew wild with flowers that shouldn't bloom in October. A small package for this address. Following procedure, not superstition, he told himself. Mike approached the porch steps. The wood felt strangely soft underfoot, the planks damp despite the dry weather. The air around the house smelled faintly of wine and copper. As he bent to place the package by the door, movement caught his eye. Curtains parting slightly in the bay window. An elderly woman watched him, silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression unreadable. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear through the glass. Mike raised his hand in awkward greeting. The woman didn't respond, just continued mouthing words while staring directly at him. The curtain fell back into place as Mike retreated down the steps, the wood now inexplicably dry beneath his feet. Back in his truck, Mike checked the name on the package. Vivian Daltrey. Beneath her name, someone had written in red ink, "She keeps us all in place." The handwriting matched the 5 rules in his pocket. Mike finished his route as the sun began to set, deliberately avoiding looking at house number 1337 as he passed. Not from superstition, he told himself, just efficiency. That night in his barren apartment, takeout containers on the counter and moving boxes still half unpacked, Mike dreamed of walking an endless mail route where every house looked identical and every mailbox contained a letter addressed to the previous resident. In each dream mailbox, he found his own face on a missing person poster, the ink still wet to the touch. Mike settled into route number 137 with the methodical precision that had defined his 18 years at the Postal Service. Each morning, coffee at 5:30 a.m., uniform pressed and ready by 6 a.m., truck loaded by 7:15. The routine anchored him when nothing else would. 2 weeks in, and the 5 rules remained folded in his breast pocket, edges softening from constant handling. Mike didn't believe them. Not really, but found himself absently touching the paper throughout the day, like a talisman. The subdivision revealed itself slowly. Unlike the anonymous apartment complexes he delivered to in Pittsburgh, these houses had character. Some pretentious, some charming, all somehow watching. He began recognizing patterns. Which residents retrieved their mail immediately, which accumulated days' worth, which peered through blinds as he approached. On Wednesday, the first rule was tested. Mike had just closed the Robinsons' mailbox when he heard a small voice behind him. "Excuse me, do you have the time?" He turned to find a little girl, perhaps 8 or 9, with strawberry blonde ringlets, too perfect for a weekday morning. She wore a blue dress with white piping that belonged in another decade, and in her hand, a single red balloon tugged upward against the windless day. Mike checked his watch automatically. It's 10:17. The girl's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. A liquid movement, like oil spreading across water. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice suddenly carrying a cadence that didn't belong to a child. "Is it time?" The hairs on Mike's neck prickled as he remembered Rule 4. Ridiculous. He wasn't playing along with this nonsense. 10:17, he repeated firmly, turning back to his mail cart. The girl skipped ahead of him, impossibly appearing at the next house instantly. "Adults always rush," she said, balloon bobbing unnaturally. "Always racing the clock, but the clock doesn't care if you win." Mike blinked, and she was gone. That evening, he found her red balloon tied to his apartment door handle, despite having never told anyone where he lived. Thursday brought Rule 3 into focus. Another package for the Blue Victorian. Mike approached the damp porch steps, noticing now that only the sections where someone would walk retained moisture. A perfect path of wet footprints, not his own. As he placed the package down, the door opened a crack. The smell hit him first. Sweet decay, like overripe fruit and old perfume. Mr. Townsend. Vivian Daltrey's voice was refined, each syllable deliberate. Our new carrier. Her face appeared in the narrow gap, elegant despite advanced age, silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her eyes, however, were wrong. Too dark, too deep, focused slightly over his shoulder, rather than on his face. "Ma'am?" Mike nodded professionally. "Just leaving your package." "Won't you come in for tea?" The door opened slightly wider, revealing a slice of the foyer where antique postal scales lined a hallway table. "I always get to know my carriers." Something about the phrasing, "my carriers," raised goosebumps on Mike's arms. "Thank you, but I've got a schedule to keep." "Of course you do." Her smile remained fixed. Time is so important on this route. As Mike turned to leave, a glimpse through the window caught his attention. Hundreds of postal artifacts covering every wall. Vintage mailbags, framed letters, black and white photographs of mail carriers. He froze when he spotted a familiar face among them, his own. A photo he'd never posed for, standing in front of the Blue Victorian. He blinked, and it was gone. Friday brought the faint sound of whistling from the Petersons' mailbox. Mike stood with letters in hand, listening to the soft, tuneless whistle emanating from the metal box. Rule 2 flashed in his mind. He glanced around. No one watching. Just pristine suburban quiet. Wind, he muttered, dismissing the sound as air passing through the metal slots. He deposited the mail quickly, the whistling stopping the moment the letters touched the box's interior. Walking away, he could have sworn he heard a voice whisper, "Thank you," from inside the closed box. By Saturday, Mike had rationalized away each incident. The girl with the balloon was just a neighbor's kid playing a prank. The photo in Vivian's house was his imagination, fueled by Dom's ridiculous warnings. The whistling was just wind. Then he found the letter. It sat in the outgoing mail of house number 1337, a simple white envelope with no stamp, addressed in flowing script to the previous resident with no return address. Rule 5. Mike stared at it, the paper seemingly ordinary, yet somehow heavier than it should be. The logical response was to return it for proper postage, but Dom's grave expression, when discussing the rules, resurfaced in his mind. He slipped the letter into his personal bag. Back at the post office, Dom was waiting, as if he'd known. Without a word, Mike handed him the envelope. The supervisor's face tightened, knuckles whitening around the paper. "Follow me," he said. Behind the building, a small metal trash can sat empty. Dom produced a lighter from his pocket, flicked it to life, and touched the flame to the envelope's corner. The paper caught immediately, burning with unusual intensity and a sickly sweet smell. "Never read them," Dom said, watching the letter curl and blacken. "Never." The flames reflected in his eyes, revealing flecks of gold Mike hadn't noticed before. "What happens if I do?" Mike asked. Dom's jaw tightened. "You acknowledge receipt." "Of what?" "An invitation." Dom kicked dirt over the ashes. "One you don't want to accept." That night, Mike lay awake in his sparse apartment, staring at water stains on the ceiling. His phone showed no new messages. His ex-wife had stopped responding months ago. The silent apartment pressed in around him, the emptiness of physical presence. He pulled out the 5 rules, reading them again under the harsh glow of his bedside lamp. Written in that architectural hand, each rule followed by a small initial. Asterisk, EW asterisk. Eleanor Weaver. The name came to him unbidden, though he was certain Dom had never mentioned it. A soft tapping drew his attention to the window. Outside, the streetlight illuminated a familiar red balloon, floating impossibly on the 3rd floor, its string tapping gently against the glass. Behind it, barely visible in the darkness, stood a child. No children. Multiple small silhouettes, their features indistinguishable, except for their wide, unblinking eyes. "It's almost time," Mike whispered, though he didn't know why. The balloon bobbed once, as if nodding in agreement, before drifting away into the night. The children no longer visible. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of walking his route backward, delivering pieces of himself to each house until nothing remained but his uniform, empty and flat on the asphalt. The storm approached like something alive. Mike watched charcoal clouds gather over the mountains as he loaded his truck, the air charged with static electricity that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Weather forecasts predicted the worst October storm in Vineyard's recorded history. Could postpone the route, Dom suggested, lingering by Mike's truck. His eyes kept darting to the darkening sky. "Nobody would blame you." "It's just rain," Mike replied, organizing his mail with practiced efficiency. "I've delivered through worse." Dom's expression tightened. "If you hit house 1337 after sunset..." "I know the rules," Mike cut him off, tired of the cryptic warnings. A month into the job, and the man still treated him like he was handling nitroglycerin instead of letters. "Do you follow them?" Dom asked quietly. Mike didn't answer, slamming his truck door instead. The storm hit halfway through his route. Not gradual spatters building to downpour, but an instantaneous wall of water descending from above, as if someone had overturned the sky. The deluge hammered against Mike's hood as he hunched over, pushing his cart through quickly forming puddles. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Probably a weather alert. But when he checked under the shelter of a porch overhang, it was a text from a number he'd deleted months ago. "Amanda, sometimes I still reach for you in the middle of the night." Mike stared at the screen, water dripping from his nose onto the glass. 3 years of marriage counseling, his wife's quiet voice saying, "There's nothing left, Mike. You're not even here anymore." The divorce papers, the empty apartment, the silence. He typed, "I miss you too." The reply came instantly. "Who is this?" Mike's stomach dropped. He dialed the number. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. "I'm looking for Amanda," Mike said, his throat tight. "Wrong number, buddy." The line went dead. Mike stood frozen, rain soaking through his uniform. He scrolled to his contacts. Amanda's number didn't match what he'd just texted. But he remembered dialing it 1,000 times. Remembered. A flash of lightning illuminated the street, followed immediately by a thunderclap that shook the windows around him. In that frozen moment of white light, Mike saw Tessa Burnham standing in the middle of the road, her red balloon glowing like a beacon. She pointed toward the western edge of the subdivision, toward house number 1337. When the darkness returned, she was gone. Mike checked his watch. 4:37 p.m. Sunset in Utah this time of year. 6:20 p.m. He still had time, if he hurried. He moved through his route with increased urgency, mail becoming damp despite his efforts. The storm worsened, transforming the carefully manicured lawns into miniature lakes. By the time he reached the Blue Victorian, his uniform was soaked through, his fingers numb with cold. Vivian Daltrey watched from behind rain-streaked glass as he placed her mail in a waterproof bag on the porch. Today, her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders, making her look decades younger until she turned her face fully toward him. In the storm's gray light, her eyes appeared completely black. She pressed her palm against the window. Mike found himself mirroring the gesture before catching himself. He pulled his hand back, noticing the perfect outline his wet palm had left on the glass, directly aligned with hers. "Not yet," he thought he heard her say, though the window remained closed between them. 5:45 p.m. The rain had not relented. Mike's pace quickened to a jog, splashing through puddles, breath coming in ragged gasps. His mail cart felt heavier with each block, as if the letters themselves were waterlogged and swelling. His phone buzzed again. New message. "Time is a route we all walk carrier." No sender information, Not Amanda's number. Not any number. 6:10 p.m. The clouds had stolen the remaining daylight. Streetlights flickered on, their glow diffused into hazy orbs by the downpour. Mike rounded the final corner. House number 1337, visible at the end of the cul-de-sac. An unremarkable beige craftsman, indistinguishable from its neighbors, except for one detail. No lights shone from within, despite the storm darkness. The house sat in perfect blackness, as if devouring the illumination from nearby street lamps. 6 மணி 18 நிமிடம். Mike's watch ticked loudly in his ears as he approached the mailbox. His fingers found the letters for this address. Bills, advertisements, a magazine, nothing that could wait until tomorrow. Rule 1. Never deliver mail to house number 1337 after sunset. The absurdity of it struck him anew. He was a postal worker, not a superstitious teenager. These people needed their mail. The rules were just hazing, or the paranoid ramblings of a supervisor on the edge of retirement. 6:19 p.m. Mike opened the mailbox. As he moved to deposit the letters, a soft whistling emanated from inside, barely audible above the rainfall, but unmistakably there. A tuneless, breathy sound, like someone trying to remember a melody long forgotten. Rule 2. If you hear whistling from inside any mailbox, close it immediately. Enough, Mike muttered, shoving the mail inside with more force than necessary. This is Riddick. The whistling stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, Mike heard the distinctive sound of the front door creaking open behind him. He turned slowly, rain streaming down his face. The door stood ajar, revealing absolute darkness within. Not the darkness of an unlit house, but a complete absence of light that seemed to swallow the glow from the street. From inside came the soft pad of bare feet on hardwood, approaching with unhurried rhythm. Mike stood transfixed, unable to move as a silhouette appeared in the doorway. A figure the same height and build as himself, features obscured by shadow. But as lightning flashed again, Mike caught a glimpse of the figure's face. His own face, smiling back at him with an expression he'd never worn. The door slammed shut with such force that the entire house shuddered. Mike stumbled backward, slipping on the wet grass and falling hard. He scrambled to his feet and ran, abandoning his mail cart, splashing through puddles that seemed to grab at his ankles. He didn't stop running until he reached the main road, lungs burning, legs trembling. A bus shelter offered minimal protection from the rain as he collapsed onto the bench, gasping for breath. It's almost time. The voice came from beside him. Tessa Burnham sat at the far end of the bench, her red balloon hovering motionless despite the wind. Her clothes were perfectly dry. Today she wore a yellow dress that might have been fashionable in the 1980s. What do you want? Mike demanded, his voice cracking. Tessa's head tilted at an unnatural angle. Want? I'm already getting what I want. She smiled, revealing too many teeth. You're a good carrier, Mr. Townsend. Better than the last one. You deliver. I don't understand, Mike whispered. You will. She slid off the bench, her movements too fluid. The route is almost complete. As she walked away into the storm, Mike noticed for the first time that she left no footprints in the puddles she passed through. That night in his apartment, Mike peeled off his soaked uniform with shaking hands. In the bathroom mirror, His reflection looked wrong somehow. His movements a half-second delayed, his eyes reflecting light at the wrong angle. He reached for his phone to call Dom, then stopped. What would he say? I think I saw myself inside a house. A creepy kid is following me. Instead, he found himself texting the unknown number from earlier. Who is this? The response came instantly. The previous resident. When Mike finally fell asleep, he dreamed of walking his route in darkness. At each house, residents stood in their doorways, faces obscured by shadow, whistling softly. In his dream, Mike approached house number 1337, where his doppelganger waited, wearing a vintage postal uniform stained with something dark that smelled of copper and wine. Return to sender, his double whispered, holding out a letter addressed to Mike in his own handwriting. Mike woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat rather than rainwater. Dawn light filtered through his blinds, revealing a red balloon floating in the corner of his bedroom, its string trailing to the floor where a puddle of water had formed. A child's laughter echoed from somewhere inside his empty apartment. Mike first noticed the changes on a Tuesday. Small things, easily dismissed. Mrs. Calloway's rose garden now sprouted sunflowers. The Nelsons' black mailbox had turned navy blue. The cul-de-sac at Vineyard Circle seemed shorter by several houses. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, but the alterations remained. Sleep deprivation, he muttered, checking his reflection in a car window. His face looked normal, except for a moment when his reflection continued staring as he turned away. The residents had changed too. They watched him now, curtains twitching as he approached, doors cracking open, but never enough to see who stood behind them. Conversations cut short when he rounded corners. Names on mail no longer matched the names on doorbells. "Morning, Mr. Townsend," called Mrs. Peterson from her porch. Yesterday, she'd been a heavy-set woman in her 60s. Today, she appeared 20 years younger, slender, with the same voice coming from different lips. "Morning." Mike replied automatically, not breaking stride. Don't acknowledge the impossible, he thought. Don't make it real. In his peripheral vision, shadows moved wrong, stretching toward him rather than away from the sun. When he turned to look directly, they snapped back to normal positions, like guilty children caught misbehaving. At lunch, Mike sat on a park bench, unwrapping a sandwich he couldn't remember making. His phone buzzed. New message. "You're noticing now. That's good. It means you're nearly ready." No number displayed. Mike's hand shook as he typed, "Ready for what?" "To deliver and be delivered." He dropped the phone as if burned. It clattered to the sidewalk, screen cracking in a pattern that resembled a crude map of his route. Most carriers don't make it this far. Mike looked up to find Dominic Reeves standing before him, though he hadn't heard the man approach. Dom's normally pressed uniform hung wrinkled from his frame, dark circles underscoring bloodshot eyes. "What's happening to me?" Mike asked, voice barely above a whisper. Dom glanced nervously at the sky, which had taken on a peculiar sepia tone despite being cloudless. "You broke the rules. It's noticed you." "What has?" "The route." Dom sat heavily beside him, the bench creaking under his weight. "It's waking up to you." Mike laughed, a strangled sound devoid of humor. A male root can't wake up. This one can. Dom's fingers drummed an erratic pattern against his thigh. It's not just houses and streets. It's a circuit. Like electricity needs a complete path to flow. You're not making sense. Carriers complete the circuit. Dom wouldn't meet his eyes. Connect all the points. Deliver what needs delivering. Mail, Mike said firmly. Dom's laugh matched Mike's in bleakness. If that helps you sleep. A red balloon drifted past, no child attached to its string. Dom flinched at the sight. What happened to Eleanor Weaver? Mike asked, the name surfacing from somewhere deep in his mind. Dom's head snapped toward him. How do you know that name? I don't know. Mike pressed his palms against his temples, trying to contain the pressure building inside his skull. It's just... there. You need to come with me. Dom stood abruptly. Now! The drive to the blue Victorian occurred in silence, the roads taking half the time they should have, distances compressing like an accordion being squeezed. Vivian Daltrey waited on her perpetually damp porch, as if expecting them. He's progressing quickly, she said instead of a greeting, her refined voice carrying across the yard. Too quickly, Dom replied. He knows about Eleanor. Vivian's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose slightly. Fascinating. She turned to Mike. Please come in. It's time we had our tea. The interior of the Victorian smelled of dust and lavender, underlaid with that strange copper wine scent Mike had detected before. Every wall space not occupied by windows or doors displayed postal memorabilia. Framed letters, vintage mailbags, postal scales, and hundreds of photographs. Mail carriers through the decades posed in front of this very house. My collection, Vivian explained, following his gaze. I've always had a special relationship with the Postal Service. The carriers in the older photos had their faces scratched out with what looked like pen marks. The more recent ones remained intact. Men and women in modern uniforms, smiling uncomfortably beside Vivian on the porch steps. Where are they now? Mike asked, though he already knew the answer. Delivered, Vivian said simply. She led them to a sitting room where tea waited, already poured into 3 cups. Steam rose despite no kettle in sight. Eleanor Weaver, Mike said, the name feeling right in his mouth. She was a carrier. The carrier, Vivian corrected, passing him a teacup that felt too warm against his palm. The original. She discovered what the route truly was, what it could do, which was transcend. Vivian sipped her tea, leaving a perfect crescent of red lipstick on the rim. Most places are just places. This place is a threshold. Dom shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He doesn't need the philosophy, Vivian. He needs to understand the danger. The danger is ignorance, she snapped, her refined demeanor cracking briefly. She composed herself, turning back to Mike. Eleanor realized the route could select certain carriers, those who match the pattern. What pattern? Vivian smiled sadly. Isolation, disconnection. People who exist, but don't belong. The words struck Mike like physical blows. 18 years of marriage to a woman who eventually said he wasn't really there. No children. No close friends. An emptiness he carried wherever he went. Eleanor was like that, he managed to ask. Very much so. Vivian rose gracefully, moving to a cabinet in the corner. Her family owned the Vineyards before the development. She lived alone in their old house, number 1337, and carried the mail. She removed a framed photograph until she became the mail. She handed Mike the photo. A woman in a 1960s postal uniform stood on these very porch steps, her smile too wide for her face, eyes reflecting light at the wrong angle. Her features were unnervingly similar to Mike's. Same jawline, same nose, same distant expression he recognized from his own mirror. The route chooses carriers who match the pattern, Vivian said softly, because they're easier to replicate, fewer connections to untangle. Mike's hand shook, tea spilling onto the photograph. The liquid seemed to be absorbed directly into the paper, the image subtly shifting, Eleanor's uniform moistening, darkening in patches that resembled the wine copper stains Mike had noticed before. Blood. Old blood. What happened to her? Mike whispered. She's still delivering, Dom answered, his voice hollow. Still walking the route. That's impossible. That would make her... Time moves differently on the route, Vivian interrupted, especially for its carriers. Mike stood abruptly, the teacup falling and shattering on the hardwood floor. The liquid spread in a pattern that resembled a map of the subdivision. I need to go, he said, backing toward the door. Michael. Vivian's voice had changed, deeper now, with an edge that stopped him cold. You've been selected. Fighting only makes it harder. Selected for what? He demanded. Replacement, Dom answered quietly. Mike fled, bursting through the front door and down the damp steps. Outside, the world had changed again. The sky now a deep twilight, though his watch read only 2:17 p.m. The houses across the street had rearranged themselves, addresses out of sequence. He ran, lungs burning, disorientation growing with each turn. Streets he knew led to dead ends. Familiar landmarks appeared on the wrong corners. Every path somehow curved back toward house number 1337, standing dark and patient at the end of every possible route. His apartment, when he finally found it, offered no sanctuary. More letters addressed to the previous resident waited on his kitchen counter, though he'd locked the door before leaving that morning. 5, 10, 20 identical envelopes, multiplying as he watched. Mike grabbed one, tearing it open despite Dom's warning. Inside, a single sheet of paper contained a crude map of route number 137. Houses marked with X's traced a pattern that, when connected, formed a symbol Mike didn't recognize, but somehow understood. A circuit, complete except for one final connection. His apartment. Beneath the map, a simple message written in his own handwriting. The next carrier has been selected. All mail will be forwarded. Mike's phone rang, the screen displaying his own name and number as the caller. He let it go to voicemail. The message, when it arrived, contained only the sound of whistling. Tuneless, breathy, familiar. Sinking to the floor, back against the wall, Mike finally admitted to himself that the rules weren't superstition or hazing. They were warnings from carriers who had realized the truth too late each rule added after someone's disappearance. He pulled out his phone and dialed Amanda's real number, the one burned into his memory despite deletion. "The number you have reached is no longer in service," an automated voice informed him. Mike tried his mother next. Same response. His former co-workers in Pittsburgh, his old landlord, his doctor, all disconnected. In the bathroom mirror, his reflection had stopped mirroring him entirely. It watched with interest as Mike splashed water on his face, head tilting at an angle his actual neck couldn't achieve. "Who are you?" Mike whispered to his reflection. His reflection smiled Eleanor Weaver's too wide smile and whispered back, "The carrier who delivers and is delivered." The Vineyard Public Library smelled of old paper and industrial carpet cleaner. Mike hunched over the microfiche reader, scrolling through archived editions of the local newspaper. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, fingers trembling as he wound through the archives from 1967. There, October 17th. The headline jumped out. "Local postal worker sought in disappearances." The grainy photograph showed Eleanor Weaver in her uniform. That too wide smile familiar now. The article described 5 residents who vanished from their homes in the Vineyard area, all living on what was then called Rural Route 7. Blood evidence found in Eleanor's home suggested foul play, but no bodies were ever recovered. Eleanor herself disappeared the day after the last victim. "They never found her," came a voice behind him. Mike startled, nearly knocking over the machine. A librarian stood there, ancient, spine curved like a question mark, eyes magnified behind thick glasses. "Pardon," Mike managed. "Eleanor Weaver." The librarian tapped a gnarled finger on the screen. "I was a girl when it happened. They searched the Vineyard for weeks." "You knew her?" Everyone knew everyone back then. She adjusted her glasses. Quiet woman. Kept to herself. Lived in that old house that survived the development. 1337 Vine Street. Mike's mouth went dry. Was there anything strange about her? The librarian's expression shifted subtly. Strange how? Did she have any unusual interests? Occult things, maybe? A wheezing laugh escaped her. "Eleanor?" "Lord, no. Just the mail. Devoted to her route. Used to say it was the only thing that made sense in her life." The librarian leaned closer, dropping her voice. Though there was talk about the previous carrier. Previous carrier? Man named Stanley Goodwin. Walked that route for 30 years before Eleanor. Story was, he trained her for a week, then vanished. His uniform was found in the Weaver Vineyard, but nothing else. She straightened. History has a way of repeating on that land. Mike switched to county property records next. The original Weaver estate encompassed everything now developed as Vineyard Heights subdivision. The land transfer occurred in 1968, a year after the disappearances, signed over by E. Weaver to Daltrey Development Corporation. Vivian's husband. Another search revealed more. 5 previous carriers assigned to what was now Route number 137 in the past 20 years. All either quit within months or were listed as employment terminated, no forwarding address. Outside, the sky had darkened to the peculiar sepia tone he'd noticed before. Mike checked his watch. 2:37 p.m. Too early for sunset. His phone buzzed with a text from Dom. "Where are you?" Mike hesitated, then typed, *library, .research, .star. The response was immediate. "Stay there, coming asterisk." While waiting, Mike searched online records for himself. His Pittsburgh apartment lease, no record. His former employer, no mention of Michael Townsend. His marriage license, document not found. Systematic erasure. Dom arrived 20 minutes later, looking worse than before. His uniform hung even looser, as if he were physically diminishing. "You look like hell," Mike said. "Been making calls." Dom sank into the chair beside him, trying to find anyone who remembers you in Pittsburgh. Mike's stomach tightened, and nothing. Directory Assistance has no record of an Amanda Townsend. Your previous postmaster says they've never had a Michael Townsend employed there. That's impossible. I worked there for 15 years. Dom's expression was grim. It's happening faster than usual. The Root must be hungry. For what? Identity. Dom glanced nervously at the windows, where the unnatural twilight deepened. Connection. The carriers it selects, they're already half faded from the world. Easier to rewrite. The truth of it stung worse than Mike expected. He'd spent years going through the motions of connection, marriage, job, home, while feeling nothing but the hollow space inside him. "How do you know all this?" Mike demanded. Dom's shoulders slumped. "My grandfather was postmaster when Eleanor disappeared. He figured out what was happening, but too late. Created the official story about murders to explain the missing residents. Officially discontinued Route 137. But it still exists. Has to." Dom lowered his voice. If the Route truly died, whatever Eleanor became would be free to expand beyond it. The Postal Service, the routine, the rules, the boundaries, they contain it. Eleanor became something, Mike whispered. The Route needed a carrier who wouldn't stop, who had nothing pulling them back to normal life. Eleanor fit the pattern perfectly. Dom rubbed his eyes. She became the Route's permanent carrier, but she needs a physical presence to interact with the world. A replacement body every few years. Mike thought of his reflection moving independently, of the face he'd seen in house number 1337's darkness. She's wearing down my connections, Mike realized, unmaking me so she can replace you, Dom finished. It's why I selected you for the Route. Mike stared, betrayal burning through him. You knew this would happen. I knew you might survive it. Dom met his gaze directly. Most carriers, they're just empty enough to be replaced, but not empty enough to understand what's happening. You're different. You feel your disconnection. You're conscious of it. So I'm what, bait? A sacrifice? A potential solution? Dom pulled a worn notebook from his pocket. My grandfather documented everything. Spent decades searching for someone who might break the cycle. He slid it across the table. I think it might be you. The notebook contained generations of observations, carriers who disappeared, patterns in resident behavior, additions to the rules after each incident. The final pages detailed Mike himself, his isolation patterns, his psychological profile, his potential resonance with liminal entities. "You've been studying me," Mike said flatly. "Preparing you," Dom corrected. "There's a difference between being unconnected and being truly empty, Mike. Eleanor is what happens when the root fills that emptiness with itself. But what if someone entered the root already filled with something else? Like what? Purpose, awareness." Dom tapped the notebook. "The will to resist." A shadow passed over the library windows, too large, too shapeless to be clouds. Mike's phone buzzed again. New message. "Coming home soon, carrier." "The mail is piling up." "It knows what we're doing," Mike said. Dom nodded grimly. "It always does. But it can't stop the mail from being delivered." He pulled out a stack of envelopes. "Which is why I brought these." Each envelope was addressed to a different house, on route number 137. But all shared the same return address. Michael Townsend, 1337 Vine Street. "Warning letters," Dom explained, "to every house on the route. The truth about what's happening." "The residents are part of this," Mike argued. "They've changed. They're not even human anymore." "Some aren't," Dom agreed. "Others are just influenced. Either way, they deserve warning before what comes next." "Which is?" Dom's expression darkened. "When Eleanor takes you, the route will expand. New development means new houses, new streets. The entity grows with each replacement." He gestured to the letters. "These might slow it down. Might even break the circuit if enough residents resist." "And if they don't?" "Then at least we tried." Dom stood, suddenly looking very tired. "The route selected you, Mike. But I chose you too, because you're the first carrier who noticed the changes before they were complete." Outside, the unnatural twilight had deepened to near darkness. Streetlights flickered on, their glow sickly yellow against the sepia sky. As they left the library, Mike spotted Tessa Burnham across the street, her red balloon glowing like a coal in the gloom. Today she wore a dress from the 1990s, her hair styled differently. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. Her face seemed to flicker between different children, features flowing like wax. "I've been seeing her everywhere," Mike said, "the girl with the balloon." Dom followed his gaze, face paling. "That's not a girl." "Not anymore." "Then what?" "The missing children." Dom's voice cracked. "All of them, from all the decades. The root takes children too sometimes, keeps them together." Tessa, or whatever wore her form, raised a hand in greeting. Her mouth moved, forming words Mike could somehow hear, despite the distance. "Is it almost time, Mr. Townsend? We've been waiting so long." The red balloon drifted upward, revealing dozens more rising behind it, each carrying the spectral outline of a child's face within its translucent surface. Mike clutched the warning letters tighter. "We need to deliver these. Now." The route had changed completely. Streets Mike had walked for weeks now twisted in impossible configurations. Houses appearing where empty lots had been. Familiar landmarks vanishing entirely. The darkened sky cast everything in that sickly sepia tone, as if the world were an old photograph fading in real time. "Stay close," Dom warned as they drove through the warped subdivision. The root is trying to separate us. Mike clutched the warning letters, each one feeling unnaturally heavy. Will these actually work? Maybe. Dom didn't sound convinced. The rules came from previous carriers, warnings they managed to leave behind. Each one figured out a piece before they were taken. They passed house after house, residents standing motionless in yards and doorways, watching, waiting. Many had begun to physically change, features blurring at the edges, bodies elongating in subtle ways that triggered deep revulsion. Dom slowed the car. We'll have to deliver these on foot. The mailboxes are part of the circuit. They'll only accept mail from a carrier's hands. The moment they stepped outside, the air pressed against Mike's skin like damp velvet. Each breath felt thick, tasting of metal and earth. The residents didn't approach, but watched with hungry anticipation. They're not trying to stop us, Mike observed. No. Dom's voice tightened. They're witnessing. House by house, Mike delivered the warning letters, slipping them into mailboxes that seemed to sigh upon receiving them. Some boxes whistled softly. He ignored the sound, remembering what had happened last time he'd heeded the rules. At the fourth house, he noticed something carved into the mailbox post. Tiny letters nearly worn away. SG was here. It's in the addresses, ... Stanley Goodwin, Mike whispered, the name surfacing from Dom's research. Eleanor's predecessor. He checked the house number, 1137. The next house, 1139. But the pattern broke there. The next wasn't 1141, but 1347. Numbers that shouldn't exist in this sequence. The addresses, Mike said, realization dawning. They're not just identifiers, they're a code. Dom nodded grimly. My grandfather suspected. The original rural route had just 5 stops. Now there are 50 houses, but the core addresses remain the same. Mike wrote down the irregular addresses as they continued delivering. 1137, 1139, 1347, 1339, 1337. They form a sequence, he realized, a path through the neighborhood that creates. He arranged the numbers in different patterns until they formed a pentagram with 1337 at its center. A summoning circuit, Dom confirmed, or a binding one, depending on your perspective. At the Calloway house, now unrecognizable with its warped architecture and pulsing windows, Mike found another hidden message carved under the mailbox lip. Me walked twice, never returned to sender dot. Me, Eleanor Weaver, Mike translated. She tried to walk the route twice in one day. Dom's eyes widened. That's what triggered all this. Carriers never double back. It's a postal service rule, efficiency of motion. But if she broke that pattern... She closed the circuit. Mike finished. Completed the loop that trapped her here. Each house revealed more fragments. Notes scratched into porch railings. Symbols hidden in decorative elements. Warnings worked into welcome mats. Previous carriers had left breadcrumbs everywhere. Attempts to communicate what they'd learned before being consumed. As they approached the blue Victorian, Mike's dread intensified. The house had grown somehow. Additional wings and turrets sprouting organically from the original structure. The perpetually damp porch now glistened with moisture that was definitely not water. Too thick, too dark, pooling in footprint-shaped depressions. Vivian Daltrey waited in the doorway, her silver hair now streaked with black, her elegant posture unchanged despite the wrongness of her proportions. "You're working against your own interests, Mr. Townsend," she called, voice carrying unnaturally across the yard. "The letters won't save them. Or you." "What are you in all this?" Mike demanded, keeping his distance from the steps. A chronicler. Her smile was eerily perfect. Someone needs to remember what was before, so what comes after has context. "You made a deal," Dom said, "after your husband disappeared." Herbert thought developing the Vineyard would break its power. Vivian's laugh was like crystal breaking. He didn't understand that progress only feeds it. New streets, new houses, new carriers. The route always expands. "And what do you get from this arrangement?" Mike asked. "Continuity." Her eyes reflected no light at all now. "I maintain the memories. Keep the collection. Document each carrier's contribution." She gestured behind her, where the Victorian's interior was visible through the open door. The postal memorabilia had multiplied exponentially. Uniform pieces, bags, letters forming a dense collage across every surface. At the center of it all hung a vintage uniform. Dark stains, now unmistakably blood, preserved behind glass like a sacred relic. "Eleanor's?" Mike asked. "The first vessel," Vivian confirmed. "There's a place prepared for yours as well." Mike backed away, stomach churning. He delivered the warning letter directly to Vivian, who accepted it with a bemused expression. "I've received this letter 517 times, Mr. Townsend," she said softly. "The warning never changes anything." They continued through the neighborhood, each delivery feeling more futile than the last. The world around them continued to warp. Trees bending at impossible angles, sidewalks rippling like water. The sky darkening further until the streetlights provided the only illumination. Mike's phone rang just as they approached house number 1337. "Townsend," he answered. "Mike." Dom's voice came through the line, strained and urgent. Mike turned to where Dom should have been standing beside him, but he was alone on the street. Dom had vanished. "Where are you?" Mike demanded. "Post office." Dom's voice crackled with static. "Found something in the archives. Records show." The line hissed, words cutting in and out. "Died 3 months ago in Pittsburgh. Car accident. Before you ever..." The connection dissolved into whistling. That same tuneless, breathy sound from the mailboxes. Mike stood frozen, the final warning letter clutched in his hand. The implications crashed through him like physical blows. If he had died in Pittsburgh, if he had never come to Vineyard, then who was walking this route? Who had been delivering this mail? The front door of house number 1337 opened slowly, light spilling onto the warped porch steps. The silhouette that appeared was immediately familiar, his own. Except it wasn't his reflection this time. It was Eleanor Weaver, wearing his face, his body, his uniform, but imperfectly, like an ill-fitting suit. The smile was all wrong, the posture too stiff, the eyes reflecting streetlight at impossible angles. "Michael Townsend," it said with his voice, "the previous resident." Mike stumbled backward. I'm Mike Townsend. Are you? Not. Mike tilted its head. Check your pockets. Mike reached into his jacket pocket, fingers closing around a worn envelope he didn't remember placing there. Addressed to the previous resident. No return address. With trembling hands, he tore it open. Inside was a death certificate. His death certificate, dated 3 months earlier. Cause of death: suicide following divorce. A newspaper clipping detailed how Pittsburgh postal worker Michael Townsend had been found in his apartment, wrists slit in the bathtub. No note left behind. You never came to Vineyard. Not, Mike said gently. I brought you here. Created this echo of you. A temporary vessel until the assimilation was complete. That's not possible, Mike whispered, though the evidence trembled in his hands. The route requires a carrier, Eleanor as Mike explained. But the carrier must believe they're real, must walk the path willingly. So I reconstruct them. Let them discover the truth gradually. The world tilted as Mike's reality collapsed. The emptiness he'd felt his entire life, the disconnection from Amanda, from everyone, hadn't been emotional isolation. It had been non-existence. He wasn't real, had never been real. Just an echo created to walk this route until Eleanor could fully claim his identity. The others figured it out too late. Eleanor as Mike continued, descending the steps with unnatural grace. But you're different. You sensed it from the beginning. That's why I chose you. Your awareness of your own emptiness. Mike backed away, his legs threatening to buckle. Why tell me this? Because it's time to complete the delivery. Eleanor as Mike held out a hand. The previous resident always becomes part of the route. Always joins the collection. Behind the entity, the doorway of house number 1337 had changed. No longer a normal house interior, but a swirling darkness that seemed to extend infinitely, punctuated by floating points of light. Red balloons, dozens of them, each containing a face. Children, adults, previous carriers, all watching with hollow eyes as the newest addition prepared to join them. I don't want this, Mike whispered. Neither did I, Eleanor replied with his voice, her true face briefly superimposing over his features. But the mail must be delivered. The route must be walked. A soft, tugging sensation pulled at Mike's edges, as if his very being were coming unraveled thread by thread. He looked down to see his hands becoming translucent, his substance flowing toward the entity that wore his face. His last coherent thought was that the warning letters hadn't been meant to save the residents at all. They were desperate attempts by previous carriers to establish their existence, to leave some mark that proved they had been real, if only for a moment. Then darkness consumed him, and Michael Townsend became just another piece of mail, delivered, received, and filed away. Consciousness returned like static clearing on a radio, fragmented, disorienting, incomplete. Mike found himself standing on a street he recognized, yet didn't. Wearing his uniform, mailbag heavy across his shoulder. The sun shone brightly overhead. Normal sky, normal houses, normal route. Except he remembered dissolving into nothingness before Eleanor as Mike. Remembered the truth of his non-existence. Remembered joining the collection of faces, trapped in darkness. This isn't real, he whispered, voice hoarse, as if unused for days. Perception defines reality for beings like us, came a voice behind him. Mike turned to find Tessa Burnham standing there, red balloon bobbing gently above her. Today she appeared older, perhaps 12, and wore contemporary clothing instead of vintage pieces. "What's happening?" Mike asked. "You're being archived," Tessa replied matter-of-factly, "but you're fighting it." Most don't. Mike looked down at his hands, solid again, though faintly translucent when he turned them in the sunlight. "I died months ago, in Pittsburgh." "Yes. Then what am I?" Tessa's expression was unnervingly adult. "A carrier delivers more than mail, Mr. Townsend. They deliver themselves, their essence, their connection to the physical world." She gestured around them. "This is your route as you perceived it. The vessel you created to contain your consciousness after death. Most carriers fade into the collective quickly, becoming part of the background radiation of the root. But I haven't. No." Tessa tilted her head, studying him. "You're different. Your awareness of your own emptiness created resistance. The entity finds you difficult to digest." A plan formed in Mike's mind, desperate, probably futile, but the only option left. If he still maintained some separate identity within the system, perhaps he could disrupt it from inside. "I need to deliver something," he told Tessa. Her expression remained neutral. "The dead don't deliver, Mr. Townsend. They are delivered." "Not this time." Mike opened his mailbag, finding it filled with blank envelopes. He removed one, and a pen materialized in his hand as he thought of it. The mailman's version of afterlife physics. He began writing, addressing a letter to every house on the route. Not warnings this time, but something more powerful. His story. His truth. His existence, however artificial it might have been. "This won't work," Tessa observed, though she made no move to stop him. "Maybe not," Mike agreed, continuing to write. "But it's what mailmen do. We deliver." As he wrote, the world around them shifted, reality rippling as if viewed through heat waves. The perfect suburban street developed imperfections, cracks in sidewalks, peeling paint on houses, shadows that moved correctly with the sun. His perception bleeding through Eleanor's constructed reality. Mike worked methodically, precisely. The skills that had defined his existence now turned against the system that created him. Each letter contained not just his story, but his essence, the fragments of identity he'd managed to preserve. "She's noticed," Tessa warned as the sky darkened prematurely. "She's coming." "Then I need to hurry." Mike moved through the route at impossible speed, slipping letters into mailboxes that snapped shut like hungry mouths. With each delivery, the world destabilized further. Houses blurring at the edges, streets folding into impossible geometries, the boundaries between reality and construct dissolving. At the Blue Victorian, Vivian Daltrey waited on the porch, her form fluctuating between elderly elegance and something ancient and hungry. "You can't rewrite the route, Mr. Townsend," she called as he approached. "The pattern is too established." "I'm not trying to rewrite it," Mike replied, holding out her letter. "I'm completing it." Vivian hesitated before accepting the envelope, curiosity overcoming caution. "Completing how?" "Every road has a beginning and an end," Mike explained. "But this one's been caught in a loop for decades. The same cycle, over and over. Eleanor delivers and is delivered. The previous resident becomes the next vessel. Understanding dawned in Vivian's inhuman eyes. You're trying to break the circuit. I'm closing it properly. Mike stepped back as Vivian opened her letter. Every piece of mail reaches its final destination, eventually. The letter in Vivian's hands began to glow with impossible light, words rearranging themselves as she read. The chronicler's face contorted with something between fear and admiration. You've addressed it to her, she whispered, to Eleanor, through you. Mike nodded. The conduit. The one who remembers. The world convulsed around them, reality fracturing like glass. Through the cracks, Mike glimpsed the true nature of route number 137. Not houses and streets, but a complex geometric pattern spanning dimensions, pulsing with dark energy. At its center, house number 1337 stood as an anchor point, a door between worlds. Mike continued his deliveries, each letter further destabilizing the construct. The residents emerged from their homes, forms shifting between human and other, watching in silent witness as they had for generations of carriers. At house number 1337, Eleanor waited, no longer wearing Mike's face, but appearing as a composite of all her previous vessels. Fragments of dozens of mail carriers cobbled together into a patchwork entity. Only the too-wide smile remaining consistent. This is pointless, she said with multiple overlapping voices. The route cannot be broken. I'm not breaking it, Mike replied, holding out the final letter. I'm redirecting it. Return to sender. Eleanor's patchwork face twisted in confusion. What? You've been waiting for someone to notice the route was a closed loop. Mike continued, the final pieces falling into place in his mind. Someone to recognize that the addresses formed a summoning circuit. But what if they're not a summoning pattern at all? What if they're a map? He held the letter closer. One that leads home. The envelope between them began to transform, expanding into a doorway of light, different from the swirling darkness of Eleanor's collection. This light was clean, final, peaceful. What have you done? Eleanor demanded, her patchwork form beginning to unravel at the edges. Addressed you properly, Mike answered. Not as Eleanor Weaver, mail carrier. Not as the entity that walks route 137, but as Eleanor Weaver, the previous resident of 1337 Vine Street, the woman who died here in 1967. Understanding and terror warred across Eleanor's fractured features. I can't. You can, Mike insisted. The route is complete, Eleanor. Your delivery is over. The light from the envelope or doorway intensified, pulling at Eleanor's form. Pieces of her began to separate. Faces, fragments, the collected carriers of decades peeling away, like layers of old wallpaper. The others, she gasped, gesturing toward the subdivision, where red balloons had begun to rise from every house. The collection will follow their own routes home, Mike promised, though he had no idea if it was true. Everyone gets delivered eventually. Eleanor's resistance collapsed suddenly, her form rushing toward the light, like water finding its level. As she passed, her true face emerged briefly from the patchwork, not the monster that had walked the route for decades, but a tired woman finally released from an endless shift. "Thank you, carrier," she whispered, before the light consumed her completely. The envelope sealed itself and dropped into Mike's palm, addressed now to Eleanor Weaver, final destination, with his own name in the return address corner. Around him, the construct continued to collapse, houses folding in on themselves, streets unraveling like yarn, the sky shredding to reveal the void beyond. The residents of route number 137 stood witnessing one final delivery, their forms increasingly indistinct as the power sustaining them faded. Vivian approached through the disintegration, her elegant facade crumbling to reveal something ancient beneath. "The route dies with her," she said, voice resonating strangely, "and everything connected to it." "Including me," Mike acknowledged. "You were never real to begin with," Vivian reminded him, though not unkindly. Just an echo she created to walk the route one last time. "Real enough to finish the job," Mike countered, feeling his own form beginning to unravel. He held up the sealed letter containing Eleanor. "What happens to this now?" "It gets delivered." Vivian held out her hand. "That's my function. The chronicler ensures the mail reaches its destination." Mike hesitated, suddenly reluctant to release his last connection to existence. "And me." "Your mail, Mr. Townsend." Vivian's smile was almost sympathetic. "And mail doesn't choose its destination." As Mike surrendered the envelope, the world around them accelerated its collapse. The houses of route number 137 imploded one by one, leaving behind not rubble, but emptiness. Blank spaces in reality where something had once existed. The streets dissolved beneath their feet, revealing the geometric pattern that had always been there. A complex web of connections, with house number 1337 at its center. Tessa appeared beside them, her form now shifting rapidly between different children. Faces flowing like water, clothing styles spanning decades. The red balloon above her had multiplied into dozens, each containing a trapped face that watched the destruction with solemn anticipation. "The children," Mike said, turning to Vivian. "What happens to them?" "They were the first collection," Vivian explained, her voice distorting as her form continued to degrade. "Before Eleanor, before the carriers, the route always needed anchors. They deserve to go home too," Mike insisted. Vivian studied him with eyes that had become pools of darkness. "Even now, facing oblivion, you think of delivering others? It's what carriers do." Something like respect flickered across Vivian's disintegrating features. She raised Eleanor's envelope, which still pulsed with inner light. "Perhaps there's room for more than one delivery in this package." She turned to Tessa and the floating balloons. "Children of the route, your mail has been held too long. It's time for delivery." The balloons drifted toward the envelope in Vivian's hand, drawn by an invisible current. As each one touched the paper, it burst silently, releasing its contained face. Not into the void, but into the light emanating from within the envelope. Tessa was the last to approach, her form now stabilized into the original child who had first asked Mike for the time. "Is it time now, Mr. Townsend?" she asked, her voice small and genuinely childlike for the first time. "Yes," Mike answered gently. "It's finally time." Her balloon touched the envelope and burst. For an instant, Mike saw her true self. A little girl lost decades ago, finally found. Then she was gone, absorbed into the light, with the others. The disintegration had reached Mike now, his edges blurring, substance becoming less distinct with each passing moment. The root had nearly completed its collapse, reality folding in upon itself until only he, Vivian, and house number 1337 remained, floating in a void of possibility. "You were different," Vivian observed, studying what remained of Mike. "More present than the others. What made you fight so hard?" Mike considered the question as he felt himself dissolving. "I spent my life feeling like I didn't exist, like I was already a ghost. When I learned that was literally true, it didn't change anything. I was still me." "A mailman to the end," Vivian mused. "Even if the end is just the beginning of another route," Mike replied. Vivian's form had nearly disappeared now, only her voice remaining as she clutched the glowing envelope. "I'll ensure this reaches its destination, carrier. Your delivery will be complete." "And the route?" "Routes never truly die," Vivian's voice echoed as she faded completely. "They just change direction." Mike Townsend, Echo, Vessel, Carrier, dissolved completely as route number 137 collapsed. His consciousness scattered, like letters blown by wind, fragments of identity dispersing across dimensions. His last awareness was of Dominic Reeves, standing in the post office archives, holding a strange envelope that had appeared in the morning mail. Addressed to the next carrier, with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper contained only 5 words. "Never trust a mailman without shadows." Dom frowned, studying the unfamiliar handwriting. Something about it tugged at his memory. A carrier he should remember, but couldn't quite place. He added the note to the wall of postal worker photographs, where a blank space waited between Eleanor Weaver's picture and the next carrier. A gap in the record where someone should have been, but wasn't. A missing piece of mail that would never be delivered. That evening, as Dom locked the post office, he noticed something unusual. His shadow stretched toward the setting sun rather than away from it. He blinked, and it corrected itself. Must have been a trick of the light. 3 months later, in the newly developed section of Vineyard Heights subdivision, construction finished on a modern craftsman home. The first new address assigned, 1337 Vine Street. A young postal worker approached with the first delivery, a housewarming package for the new residents. As she climbed the porch steps, she noticed they felt strangely damp despite the dry weather. The air smelled faintly of copper and wine. Inside the mailbox, a single letter waited in the outgoing mail slot, addressed to the previous resident with no return address. The carrier hesitated, remembering her supervisor's strange instructions for this route. 1. Never deliver mail to house number 1337 after sunset, even if you're running behind. 2. If you hear whistling from inside any mailbox, close it immediately and move to the next house. 3. Always place packages for the blue Victorian on the porch, never in the mailbox, and never look through its windows. 4. If a child with a red balloon asks you for the time, say only, "It's almost time," and continue walking. 5. If you find a letter addressed to the previous resident with no return address, bring it back to the post office and burn it. 6. Never trust a mailman without shadows. From inside the mailbox, the faint sound of whistling could be heard, tuneless, breathy, patient. The carrier closed it quickly and continued her route, the letter left behind. Whatever it was, it could wait for tomorrow. Behind her, the door to house number 1337 opened slightly. A figure watched from the shadows, features indistinct except for a too-wide smile and eyes that reflected light at impossible angles. The route always continues. The mail must be delivered. And somewhere in the spaces between deliveries, in the geometric pattern connecting house to house, in the whistling from inside mailboxes, and the children with red balloons, fragments of Michael Townsend remained, not delivered, not returned, but perpetually in transit. Neither sender nor recipient. Just the mail itself, moving endlessly through a route that had no beginning and no end.